There we go. All right. So yes, this is day 2 of our snake game workshop. If you have not seen me before, my name is Linda Hahn. I'm a PD specialist here with CodeHS. I used to be a computer science teacher as well. And before I came to CodeHS, I was also a teacher trainer. And I'm excited to be a part of the teacher trainer program and now a PD specialist, but I'm also excited to introduce Gary Vanderlinden, who is our teacher trainer today. He is from Loudoun County, Virginia, and we're going to hear from him today, part 2 of our snake game in Java. Very excited to be here. So as we're kind of getting set up, I'm going to drop a couple of links into the chat for you. First, there is attendance. We generally take attendance each day to just see who is here, and also later also ensure that you get those recordings. If you signed up, you should receive a recording. So in the chat, if you click that link, it'll automatically note your attendance. You don't have to complete a survey or anything like that. Second link I'm going to drop into the chat is for anyone who is here and has not created a teacher account just yet. If you are new to the teacher work, the free PD workshops, and this is your very first PD, you can sign up for a free teacher account, codehs.com/sign up. And today we're going to be working from the slides that we were working from yesterday, and I'm going to drop those real quick in the slide into the chat as well. Those include a couple of different notes that I'm going to drop as well. But one thing that you want to have up and running is the actual sandbox link that Gary has created for us. And you'll see that here in the chat, as well as the notes for today. And so both of those can be found in the slides in case you don't see them in the chat. So again, codehs.com/Java-snake, and you're going to be able to see the modifications to the Java Snake program. If you want to save this program for yourself, you're going to want to fork that program. You have the ability to do so by just clicking on that fork, and it'll create a remix of this particular program so that you can work on it for your own project. And then again, you can find Gary's notes, snake-notes 2. So these are the notes for day 2. They do build on each other, but if you wanted this notes from day 1 and day 2 to use for teaching purposes, you can also access those from day 1 there at the bottom. So without further ado, I want to get you to Gary, and I'm going to stop share so that he can share his screen.
All right, good afternoon, folks. Thank you for coming back. And if any of you were not with us yesterday, that's fine. As Linda was just saying, everything is out there on the different websites, and so you can certainly get it. Now, what I did in terms of the website, I know yesterday we did not get to the end where I wanted to, where we would actually have the snake game icon show up on our menu. And so in today's starter code, it's already done, and I'll walk you through. There's just 5 lines of code. So if you did not get this far yesterday and you don't want to fork it again, it's in the notes, but basically if you go to line 109 in the runner, and this is very similar to what we were doing yesterday, this is the snakehead. So we uncommented 109 and then 207. And so again, it's just kind of repeating what we did yesterday, instantiating the snakehead. And then line 236, which was basically where we called the runner in the snake head. Now, if you notice, when we're doing that, we're using 4 variables here besides the graphics. These are all Boolean, left, right, up, and down, that we'll get to today, that tells the snakehead which direction should I move if I need to move. Well, to do that, then we have to go back to lines 54 to 57 and uncomment the variables right here. Otherwise, it will give you the compile error. So once you've done that, then you have the snake head, which is actually from the game right here. Now, it doesn't do anything. I know it says here, when you're ready, click on the snake head. Well, that's where we're starting today. The first thing we're going to do today, and again, in the notes, what I've done is I'm just going to keep running day 1, day 2, and day 3. So the notes day 2 includes from day 1. But today we're going to start with adding the mouse listener. Now, again, if you've done this before, maybe it will be repeating. It's not terribly challenging, but it does sometimes the first time seem a little bit overwhelming. So the first thing we're going to do, and pretty much all the changes are going to be right here in this runner object. If you notice here on the class statement, we commented out some stuff before. We just had the extend the J panel. Well, we're going to uncomment this first part that says implements the mouse listener. I'm going to leave the comments in there for the key listener. We're going to get to that today, but we're just going to start with the mouse listener. And so again, the difference between extends and implements, just real quick, extends means I'm inheriting. Whatever the JPanel object has, I'm inheriting all of that. And I can access it, I can override it, whatever. Implements means this is an interface. And when I implement an interface, I must implement every method in the interface. Otherwise, I get a compile error, even if I'm not using it. So the methods, and I'm just, you can, if you're following along on the notes, we're going to get to them, but there's 5 methods that we're going to have to implement. We're only using one. There's the mouse pressed, the mouse released, the mouse entered, the mouse exited, and the mouse clicked. And you can do different things with the mouse control based on those 5 methods. So for us, we're going to, number 1, we're going to start with a variable at line 83. That variable is kind of our variable. Remember yesterday I talked about first time, and we had some setup material. Well, because of trying to do the menu screen, I actually need a second Boolean to tell me when the game can start. Normally, the game would start, if you didn't have the menu screen, right after that. Well, because I threw in the menu screen, I have to click on the menu screen to say when I want to start. Therefore, I have to be able to tell my program, oh, okay, we can start the game now. So that's what that variable is going to do. The next thing we're going to do is in the constructor, which is line 135. If you notice, we had some items in here. Yesterday, we didn't need them. Right now, we're only going to start with this last one at 135 to add the mouse listener to this object. That's technically telling it which one to attach itself to. Then we're going to go to the methods, and we got to scroll all the way down to lines 438, almost to the bottom. And so we get down here, and all of a sudden you see this public void mouse pressed, mouse event E. And we got some stuff in here. Now, if you scroll down through here, you see the other methods I just mentioned, but if you notice, it's just an open and close bracket. I have to put them in there, otherwise it won't compile, but I'm not planning to use them. I am just planning to use the mouse pressed. And so we are going to start at 438 and just highlight all this down through, it's almost to the very end, down through line 471. And yesterday I mentioned this, but to either comment a group or to uncomment a group, just control and the normal slash key. I got to be in the right spot here, sorry. And it will uncomment them all versus having to do line by line. Okay, now let's just talk through a couple of the things that's going on in here. Notice that I've got two variables, X and Y. Hopefully, when you're thinking about a mouse, you know that's the X and Y of the mouse. And so I can use the mouse event, the E variable, to get the X and to get the Y of the mouse. Then I just created a artificial rectangle for the mouse because it doesn't have a rectangle. And so I just made it the X and Y, and I just made it 5 by 5, very small rectangle. The reason I did that was so I could use the collision detection, the keyword intersects. It needs rectangles. And so I created the artificial rectangle so I could just jump on that intersects method and do that. So it's testing the mouse rectangle, this rectangle right here, dot get bounds. That's a method that we can use on any rectangle, get the bounds. Intersects my snakehead, get snake bounds. And let's just make sure. And so that's going to take my snakehead, and there's a method over there that returns the rectangle for the snakehead. And now I've got the mouse rectangle. I'm sorry, yes, the mouse rectangle, and it's going to compare, do they overlap anywhere? You could write that code manually. To be honest, I rarely do that anymore because it's so tedious, and we can take advantage of the intersects. And if that's true, then I'm turning that Boolean on to say, hey, let's start the game. All right. Now, just to see if this is all working, I would suggest we just add a print statement. I'm going to add it in here. And, you know, it can be whatever you want, but just so you can see it, that it's working, just a system.out.println, and just something like mouse, just something so we know that it got there. All right. Hopefully, I always hate typing in front of people, but let's just try it and see what happens. And so now we're back to our menu screen. And now let's see if I click on that, does it work? And notice that it does. If you notice down here at the bottom, it printed out mouse. And so we have just implemented the mouse listener. Now we just have to go back and to keep our game going forward. So we've got the mouse listener. And by the way, I'm just going to suggest we delete this line for the print. The reason I say that is otherwise I'm afraid our line numbers, when I give you my line numbers, are going to be off. So that's the only reason for that. Okay. Now let's talk about starting the game. So if we go back up in our runner and we uncomment lines 266, and I know there's a bunch of code in here, but 266 and 267 and 268. We're going to uncomment these. Because notice, they're the first lines of code that are going to execute every time after the first time. Up until now, it didn't exist. So now it's going to say, is that variable timer started, that Boolean, is it on? And so then it will fall through into here. Now, the first thing you see here is super.paint component G. Now, super is the command that gets used when I have inheritance. And it's referring to the parent. In this case, that's the J panel. And so it's calling the JPanel's paint component method. And what that method will do is erase the screen for me. It just takes everything on the screen and wipes it away. And that way I can redraw it every time that I come through here. If you're doing a game where you do not want it to go away, then you take that statement out. But that's a way to clean the screen off every single time. All right, and And then we have to also uncomment line 378 down here for the close of that if statement. If we don't do that, I think we're going to get a compile error. And I'm hoping that I did all those things correctly. Okay, so now when I click on it, I've got a blank screen because I haven't done anything else yet in my game, but I can tell now I'm into my object where I can start doing some things. So the first thing I'm going to suggest is to add a background screen to the game. So this is very similar to what we did yesterday. We're going to go to line 110 up here, and we're going to uncomment my background screen that I use for the game. I called it jungle. It's just a jungle image. So uncomment 110. We're going to come down to 203. And in 203, I'm instantiating the jungle object, which you should be able to get to today. It should be in the library. And all that is doing is displaying an image, just like we did yesterday. And then line 270, and line 270 then is just calling the jungle draw statement. So it's calling my jungle, the variable we used when we instantiated it, and it's calling the draw method. When we did the menu, we only displayed it one time. Because we're erasing the screen every time, I've got to repaint it. And so we're going to repaint that every time. Now let's take a shot and run this one more time. And with any luck, we're going to have our background jungle picture. And so what you don't see, because the computer runs so much faster than our eyeballs do, is this picture is being repainted every 50 milliseconds right now. And so it's not static, it's just being repainted, and we just don't see it. That's the illusion of motion when we're dealing with this. Okay. Now let's add our snake's head to our game head. So we're going to go to line 271, where we're just right there, and we're going to uncomment that line. Now, if you notice this time, and yesterday we used the very same, whoop. Ooh. I'll just leave that be for right now. We used the very same statement back up in first time to draw the snake head on our menu. So we're going to stop and run it again. And I know we haven't talked through the snakehead program yet. Hopefully we will get to that. But now you notice we have the snakehead on the game console or screen. Now you do notice today it looks like the tongue is sticking out and stuff. We'll go through that here in just a minute. But let's do the next thing. Let's add the apple to the screen. That's what we're going to try to eat with the snake. Again, this is very similar to what we did yesterday. Go to line 111. And we're going to define our variable for the apple file. That's the file name or the class name. And I'm going to call it my apple. Then I'm going to go down to line 204. And I'm going to instantiate it. I'm not sure what my cursor is doing, but that's all right. I'm going to instantiate it. And then I'm going, yes.
If you just hit the insert button on your keyboard, it should fix that cursor issue.
And who says you can't learn something every single day? Thank you. I'm not sure what I did to create that, but thank you so much. But if we go down to 298 now, this is where we're going to call to draw the apple right here. So now we're going to draw the apple. And so again, let's just see what happens. And I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but I'm just hoping that between the actual code, the document, and a little bit of time we have here, the talk, that it works. So now we have a snakehead and we have an apple. Okay, now let's talk about collision. So again, we talked about it just a minute ago when I was talking about the mouse and the snakehead on the menu screen colliding. So the collision's the same process every time. If we go down to line 327, and we're going to uncomment 327 through 329 for right now. And so if you notice this statement, let me slide this over so that we don't see that right now. 327 is basically getting the apple, getting the bounds. Now, when we look at apple, apple's an image. It's not a rectangle. And so in this method called getAppleBounds, it's creating a rectangle for this boundary of the apple image. Because again, the intersects method needs to have rectangles. And the snakehead is a rectangle. And so again, we get that boundaries. And if it's true, then we fall through here. So right now, we're just going to fall through and we're going to come down to line 360 right here. And we have to close that if statement. Now, when that happens, it will check the collision, but nothing's going to happen because we haven't been able to move the snakeheads yet. Now, 327 through 329. I thought maybe I missed one. Oh, my apple eaten. I'm sorry. I did uncomment that. So again, my apple is my instantiation of the apple object. The apple eaten method is simply just a method that will make the apple disappear and reappear somewhere else randomly. That's what that method will do. So, you can look at that method when you have time. I don't know that we have time right now to look at that. Because what I want to do now is implement the KeyListener, because we want to be able to move this snake's head so we can go get that apple. And so, again, it's going to be similar to what we did for the mouse listener. The first statement we're going to go to is this class statement again at line 20. And now you can uncomment the rest of it. We're going to implement the KeyListener. Again, it's a interface, and so we have to implement all the methods of it. The next thing we're going to do, though, is come down to the constructor over here. And again, you're going to see that we had two lines in here that were still commented out. We're going to uncomment those. The focusable says make the screen I'm on the focusable and then add the KeyListener. You have to do them both or the KeyListener does not work. All right. Now, let's go to the methods. And again, they're all the way down to like 392 again. They're right, I think, before the mouse listener. And when we get down there, this time you see a different structure. You see this @ override. Maybe somebody on the call knows better than I, but they worked either way. All right. We're overriding the methods in the interface. And so whether I do it this way or this way, they both work. Now, here's the methods again. We have key typed, key released, key pressed are the three methods that, that we have to worry about. Now notice, you notice that I'm not implementing key typed. Key released, my finger came off and I'm just implementing for left, right, up and down keys. So when my finger comes off the key, I want to be able to tell my program, I don't want to move anymore. And so I'm using something called a switch case, and I'm not sure if that's something that you're comfortable with or familiar with, but basically we're getting the key code, which tells us, is it left, right, up or down? And then the case statements is where we test each of those. So if you think about it as a number, this could be, let's say, number, switch on number, case 1, case 2, case 3, case 4. It's like a nested if statement. It's just a little bit cleaner way to do that. And notice that I'm turning off every one of the Booleans in the key release statements. And the break you have to put in after the case, otherwise they keep on going through them. Now on the key pressed, obviously I'm doing the opposite. I'm turning the true on for whichever key was pressed. So again, that's kind of how the key listener is going to work. And what that will now do, because these variables will be set, is if I go back up to where we called the SnakeHeadRunner right here, excuse me, we're passing it the graphics package, but the left, right, up, and down. And so every time the timer goes off, every 50 milliseconds, it's going to pass the values of those. Now, the reason that I set it up that way is so that you could hold the arrow key down and let go. And that way the mouse or the snake's head will continue to move until you let go. It's just a technique that you can use. All right, so let's just see if we can actually get that to move. All right, so let's go over here. And now let's try the left arrow and look at that, it moves. And I can hold down the up arrow and I can go to the left and I can hold my down arrow. And notice our collision detection was working too. So when I intersect is when that calls that method in the apple that says, okay, it's been eaten, relocate randomly on the screen. And so now we're starting to have some fun. Okay, now let's go over and talk about the snake head. I have to open this back up so I can get to it. Let's go talk about the snake head for a minute, because there's a lot of stuff in this guy. And so number one, if you notice here in line 176, so the snake head, I'm using something called a rounded rectangle 2D. And if you can look at it, you can see the corners are rounded. And that was just an artistic choice that I made. You know, it's not a big deal. So when I fill the rectangle, I'm using the rectangle's X, the rectangle's Y, the rectangle's width, and the rectangle's height, and how big. Okay, so what I have done right here is to get to each of the variables for a rectangle. And so now I can modify those, and when I draw it, it will use those variables. And so again, sometimes we don't actually get to the X and Y's of a rectangle, but in this case, that's how we are moving the snake's head. Just real quick, and I know we're almost out of time. If you notice in the code here, there's something called if last left. What that is trying to tell us is, okay, right now it's facing left. Well, if I want to go down, it has to know, okay, what was it last time? Do I have to turn or not? And so if I push right, it has to know, well, last time I was pointing down, and so I've had a change. The rectangle or the snake's head is not changing. What is changing are the location of the eyeballs and the tone. That has to be redrawn manually for each time, and that's what you see going on down here. All right, Linda, I'm sorry, it's 3:30. I need to probably be quiet and let people ask questions. We obviously have till 3:45, and we can do anything we want, but that is kind of where I was hoping we could get today. So with that, Linda, I'll let you take over. I don't know if there's any questions in the chat room.
Yeah, we had a question earlier about the whether instead of a snake head, could it be a button?
I'm sorry, for which?
Instead of the snake head being the trigger, could it be a button? That was one of the questions we had a little earlier.
Like a J button?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
That was from Kent.
Okay. Typically, I would say you can mix however you want. If you're talking about a J button on a graphic screen, that might be a little bit challenging. But I mean, you can certainly try. I just don't think you can move it around the screen quite like that.
Priscilla says she's having an error on line 417.
417? Oh, sorry. On the runner, I suppose, not in the snake head. So go back over to the runner. 417. Are these all uncommented? Is the error that this is expecting a different kind of statement?
Priscilla, if you want to, feel free to, you can unmute too, if that's easier. It says error method does not override or implement a method for from a supertype override.
Oh, okay. Let's just go back up in the let's start at the class statement, make sure that we changed everything here. So in the class statement, do we have the key listener showing without the comments? And if that's true, then the next thing would be in the constructor to make sure that we've uncommented, add the key listener, and the focus and add the key listener. Because I believe that error message is one where you've added the overrides, but there's nothing to override. So let me just go back up real quick. And if I just add this comment in, let me see if I can replicate that error. Yeah. So I suspect it might be that this was still commented out, would be my guess.
It was.
Okay, great. Excuse me. Linda, any other questions?
Not in the chat, but we can open it up. If anyone wants
Okay.
to unmute and ask a question, feel free, or in the chat, whatever works better.
And I'll be the first one to admit, this is Gary's way of doing this. There is no right way. I'm not sure about wrong, because wrong would mean it doesn't work. But this is how my brain tends to work. And as we all know, programmers are sort of like DNA. They're all kind of unique. And you develop that over the years, and you can tell from my hair, it's been a lot of years. And so if you either find or personally have a different approach, that doesn't mean it's wrong. It's just a different approach, and certainly can work very well. I'm just trying to share kind of the way I put this together as part of the exercise I use in my class.
Yeah, Joe says he likes the idea of building, then uncommenting stuff to add functionality. That's a really good teaching method too, yeah.
You know, everybody again has opinions. In this day and age, I find that the students love to play games more than they like to listen to me. And so I try to introduce gaming as early into the curriculum as I can for the intro to programming course. And that's what this is part of. We start with, basically the one I start with is just building a snowman and having it move. I mean, just something kind of simple to get some of the fundamentals down, and then we'll move to like a Pong game or whatever. So again, I just have convinced myself over the last few years that I think I get more participation when they are working on a game, even though they might be learning some of the Java fundamentals. Any other questions, suggestions?
Joe said, how do you uncomment multiple lines in the CodeHS IDE? So
multiple lines?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. So, so let me just go back up here. I'm going to take the import statements and I'm going to group comment them. So it's the control key and the slash key. And if I want to uncomment, it's the same process. You're probably never going to see that written down anywhere. You know, you kind of stumble across it just like this when somebody else does it, and you're like, all this time I've been doing each line. But yeah, and I know that works in Python as well, and I think in C and C++.
That was great. I never knew that either. I just learned that yesterday when you showed us. And somebody said for Mac, it's command and slash.
I'm sorry?
For Mac users, command and slash works.
Hmm.
Any other questions, guys?
Oh, thank you, John. I see you put in there about for the Mac. I'm so sorry. I don't mean to ignore the Mac world. Obviously, in my school, we use PCs, and so, you know.
So also want to throw this out to the teachers, but what are some variations you can use with this particular program? So something that you may be thinking about or wondering about.
And if I could just add one more input in here. You will notice in the snakehead, I touched on this briefly yesterday, but notice I do have some public static variables. And the idea of a public static variable is that it can be referenced and changed by any other object in the collection of this program, so that I basically have one copy in the computer's memory when I'm at execution time of this variable. And so all the programs then share this. They can't have that same variable name. It would be a local variable. So there's only one static variable that they all can share. And tomorrow, you're going to understand why I needed these variables to be able to pass over to, for instance, the snake body, because the snake body needs to know where was the snake head, kind of thing. So we'll get to that tomorrow when we add the body to the game.
All right. If you have questions and you want to stay behind the next couple minutes here while we close out, feel free to stay. I know a few you have to get going. Thank you so much for joining us today, and I'm so grateful. Thank you, Gary, so much for part two. This was fun because I feel like not only could we see the code from yesterday, kind of building upon the basic foundation of the first page of the program, but now we get to see it moving. So it's very cool. Very, very cool.
And tomorrow, as I look at day 3 goals, which you should see in the instructor notes, we're going to create the snake body. And for my version of it, it's an array of objects, and we're going to have 30 of them. That's just an arbitrary number. You can make that 100 if you thought you could play the game. I have a hard time playing with 30, but I'm not a good gamer. So we're going to do that. We're going to keep score. We're going to keep the snake head from going off the screen, things like that tomorrow. Finish it up. But thank you, guys. Thank you for participating.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Oh.